Okay, so I'm here with Igor Jerman, who is an incredible international scientist who has his own institute and which is specialized in electromagnetic frequency and evolved onto the science of water. So I just hope you could give us some context for how you have evolved from one to the other.
From, let's say, bioelectromagnetics to new water science.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, we are still doing both sciences, but more and more that we explored, investigated the interaction between organisms and electromagnetic fields. We also learned that organisms have their own endogenous electromagnetic fields, and that they are responsive to, of course, other fields, and that they have a specially ordered water or water domains, so-called coherent water domains, and that this highly ordered, even biochemical, in biochemical respect, ordered processes within organisms are based on organized or highly ordered and coherent water. So it's all interconnected, we even learned that you can emit certain frequencies, from sender to water, and then you can drink this water and you achieve some healing effects. So
and when you say from sender, you mean just from the power of your frequency of thought, or you're talking about a molecule of DNA, or
yeah, what is a sender? There is a very broad repertoire of this. I would say it can be an electromagnetic emitter of certain healing electromagnetic vibrations.
Okay,
like,
from a
pulse
tool,
field,
from
yeah,
from a technology.
And it may be also from healer, also, or Rai used, for instance, something very similar from the sun. Actually,
Okay.
Okay.
The sun interacting with the electromagnetic frequency of the water in the cell to energize the cell or the body.
He had a little different theory. He was speaking about the so-called orgone, some special vibration that would stem from sun, and he captured these, let's say, specific vibrations or rays into the copper plates, and then he led this to glasses full of water. This water was then consumed by his patients, and this alleviated their problems.
Wow. So the sun reprogrammed the water into a structure that had the capability to heal when conducted through the copper.
It is also known from easy research, for instance, that near-infrared emission can also reprogram water, or it can make thicker this easy water, this exclusion water zone. So the zone of very ordered water that is bound to hydrophilic surfaces.
So the more infrared, so the more light, the thicker the structured water. So you could theoretically, increase the quantity of infrared and light and increase the area or the quantity of structured water within any one cell.
Yes, actually you may, with certain frequencies in near infrared.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'll just confirm, so the easy water that we're talking about is the area of water that is, when it's in contact with a natural surface, it becomes structured, highly sophisticated, you say, or intelligent, or capable of storing information, or consciousness.
Well, um, you know, it would be a little too far-fetched to say that this water requires consciousness or so, but we can say that the water that is more ordered, more complex, can support our brain functions better, and that we can think better than. So, in this sense, it could support consciousness,
Yes.
our mind functions.
Yes, but so we're leaping into the great unknown, but you're saying water itself doesn't have a mind of its own. It's just
It is
storage, like a
it is
computer.
difficult. It is difficult to say. I'm not how to say close to this possibility,
Mm,
but in science, everything should be validated, through
yes,
certain experiments, and I think that this haven't yet been validated.
you'd have to
So,
you'd
as a
have to see
scientist,
water having an
I can
opinion.
say this is just a hypothesis.
Um, okay, so let's go back to what we know. So, over the
Yeah.
time that you have tested the water, you have been able to identify that the water, under certain circumstances or in a natural environment, from whether a riverbed or a human body or a human cell, has the power to become incredibly sophisticated in its structure under certain conditions. And then your work is about applying that as to how it can change the substance or the state of the human body or of human health.
Yes. I would say first that any water that we drink, according to certain theories stemming from quantum field theory, are structured to a certain degree, let's say at normal temperatures around 20 degrees centigrade, around 40% of water should be ordered in the so-called coherent quantum domains that are some 100 nanometers of length. So water has some basic structure, and if it borders some hydrophilic surface, it has also, let's say, a relatively thick layer of ordered water that is called easy water, was called by Professor Pollack, and is researched today by many laboratories. So, and in our organisms, we have, in our cells, um, many hydrophilic surfaces in every cell, and water that borders these surfaces is also ordered to some degree. But now, water, as I told, that we drink, has some basic order, but in addition to this basic order, it can have also some uh, more sophisticated order, or let's say information from certain substances or fields, that are
Okay, so
superimposed on this basic order.
it's like a matrix that can then have different information, instructional information put into it from
Yeah, yeah.
whether it's food or poison.
Now, this is still, I would say, the science of water, because it is not supported by governments, has certain problem and shortcomings. So it is difficult to say what science here would say. The new science of water normally investigates, let's say, homeopathic or ultra high diluted some solutions. And in this respect, we are dealing with water that can be basically originally informed from certain poisonous mother tinctures. If you know homeopathy, you would know that at the start, many times there are poisons, high poisons like arsenicum, for instance, or certain poisons from snakes, but they are highly diluted and potentized. And of course, these poisons are through this so-called succussion process. They are brought to the stage where this information is no more poisonous, but represents a challenge for the organism. And this challenge reminds the organism to regain its health. Such is the work of homeopathy, one of, I would say, proverbs of homeopathy is similia similibus curantur, which means that like cures like, And so this is the reason why many times poisons are used in homeopathy. But these poisons went through a very sophisticated, elaborated process. Another story is if these poisons are exposed to our rivers or lakes or underground water, then these poisons, their information can be ingrained into water in the sense that this water would still works in an inhibitory, in and harmful way on organisms. So not like in homeopathy, but like in allopathic medicine,
So you're saying, so when it goes through a sophisticated process in homeopathy, that's one thing. But when, for example, 1080 monofluoroacetate is dumped in the rivers, lakes, and streams, it will, and this is one of the most highly hazardous poisons as classified by the WHO. It's a torture poison, so when it's dropped in our bush, it mass torture poisons all the animals to death over many, many hours or days of agonizing, cruel pain. It's a horrific thing to watch the animal die of this poison, very distressing. And then obviously in all the animal studies, it creates everything from breathlessness, respiratory difficulties, heart problems, brain and heart scarring. Obviously it's an endocrine disruptor chemical and it's a neurotoxin. So endocrine disruptor chemicals, the science indicate that it's a trigger for reproductive organ cancers because it's mutagenicity, or it deforms the cell and triggers it targets those organs. So
okay, if I can come back to the water science, because I'm not a toxicologist, so I don't know very much about the biochemical working of certain poisons. It's biochemical stuff. But if I come back to the water science, what I know is that there are poisons, and this was a topic of certain scientific research that can, how to say, thin, or narrow the exclusion zone, so that actually it is known that certain poisons can induce more disorder in water, you know.
Yeah.
And so uh, again, so if water is exposed to certain poisons, and if these poisons are still present in water, you know, they can work in diminishing the order of the our bodily water when this poisonous water is consumed by us
Yes.
or by animals, you know, or by plants, if you wish. And this means that our vitality then is diminished. This is quite another story than with poisons in homeopathy, when the process, homeopathic process, induces more order. But here, you know, with these poisons, there is no homeopathic process, no succussion.
No.
And as I told you, the researchers demonstrate that many of these poisons can bring more disorder into water. If the exclusion zone is diminished, this would mean that the organism can have less energy, you know, and also
And in the
that,
case of this specific poison, its purpose is to mimic the citrate molecule as the fluorocitrate molecule and interrupt the Krebs cycle so that the cell itself dies because it cannot transform energy, food
yeah,
and light into
yeah,
energy. So the cell
yeah,
itself
yeah.
dies or mutates to trigger other diseases. So you've got
Mm,
the molecule and the fact that it's then the degradation molecule of the fluorocitrate molecule that stays whole and travels through the water and food system, arguably for a very long time, if not forever, until consumed. And then that molecule is able to reprogram the water itself to the frequency or according to Montaigne's work, perhaps an enhanced frequency of the poison itself. The entire body
uh,
of water becomes like a loaded gun.
yeah, yeah. I think that, yeah, if you make the parallel with Montaigne's work, you know, he also found actually that very aggressive, you know, um, nucleotide sequences of DNA from certain virulent bacteria or viruses, you know, um, not from the good ones, you know, but from those who are very aggressive, you know.
Yeah.
They actually make this what he called nanos or nanoparticles or certain structures in water, you know,
Yeah.
water clusters, let's say, that are can then be reproduced by PCR, you know, from only water, you know. He actually proved that certain negative structures like this DNA sequences, aggressive, let's say, can be reproduced. So they reside in water. And what he demonstrated
Ah,
also is that even when you get rid of AIDS virus, you know, HIV virus, okay, you understand, yeah,
yeah,
HIV.
yeah,
Um, there are still you know, this information in our blood about the virus
yeah.
in this let's say water clusters that are bound to our blood, and one is really free of this illness only when it is demonstrated that no electromagnetic imprint from these sequences is left in our blood. So, yes, in parallel, we can say that certain poisons can have a strong imprint in water, that they can remain in water, like as information in these water clusters, similarly to this information of DNA sequences with Montagnier experiments.
And the way that you just worded that, you could almost word it that it's not only imprinting the water with that frequency, or it's in fact replicated the molecule, the negative aggressive molecule.
Yes. I know what I think. It is a work of very, I would say, one of greatest theoretical biologists, Stuart Kaufman,
Yeah.
who tells that our biochemistry is almost capable of absolute self-reproducing. I mean, it is so rich that it can reproduce almost any molecule. Okay, it's below the level of absolute reproducibility, but just below it, according to him. And this means that, yes, if we get some poisonous information, it seems that our organism can reproduce a molecule that is like a template, like a DNA template. I mean,
And what
information
was
or
that scientist that you,
subtle template, for the
yeah.
reproduction of material molecule.
And what was that scientist that you said that it could be reproduced? Our biochemistry is reproducing?
Sorry, what
Who,
was the question?
who was the scientist who published about that?
Oh, no, the scientist was Stuart Kaufman.
Stuart.
Two Fs.
Okay.
Stuart Kaufman, he's one of the biggest theoretical biologists, and
Okay.
okay, he only tells that our biochemistry, he did not speak about poisons, but about our biochemistry, I'm just extrapolating and, just thinking about what
Like
he says, he
linking
say that
Montaigne's work to,
yes, I'm linking
Kaufman's
because
work.
he say that our biochemistry can reproduce almost any molecule that is within our biochemical network.
Yeah.
So that is actually self-reproducing.
Yeah.
And I
Which
would say,
relates to the mad cow disease work that we were speaking about earlier,
of
where you
course,
are
of course,
experimenting about the
yes,
fact that
yes,
the mad cow
yes,
protein or
yeah,
poison or substance
yeah,
self-replicates in the chemistry of the brain. So
yeah,
theoretically, if that is a sort of a poison protein that is being consumed, and then
yeah,
the easy water helps it to self-replicate in the chemistry of the brain to, I don't know, consume the brain.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes.
It's more so okay, so if we understand that the poison, a very aggressive negative poison in water will uh will reprogram the water around it, so it will restructure the water around it to the information of that poison, or in the work of Kaufman, it will actually replicate that molecule. In the case of 1080 poison, that it will
I would say that our biochemical network, according to Kaufman, our biochemical network is capable of reproducing almost any substance that is included in this network, and this is a very huge network.
yeah.
Just look at biochemical networks on, just Google it, and you will see
It's huge. But if you
what a
relate that back
complexity it is.
to, if you relate that back to Montaigne's work, uh, he's saying that when it's a particularly negative, aggressive
Yeah.
molecule, then it will destructure the water.
Yes, what struck me actually, and is still somewhat is strange for me, and perhaps I will ask Montagnier why he thinks it's so, but Montagnier did not achieve this reproducibility of DNA sequences by any DNA sequence, but only with DNA sequences that belongs to very virulent, aggressive species of bacteria or viruses. This is interesting. And he says that perhaps because they are virulent just because they somewhat manage to reproduce in water, not by their biochemical power, but by their power to induce their structure in water.
So by by how lethal they are, like in the terms of a poison, the more extremely lethal, the more powerful more power it would have to imprint the water.
Yes, it seems that scientifically speaking, I cannot say that any poison has a special power to reprogram water. But following Montagnier, we can say that there is a safe assumption that there are many poisons that are poisonous just because they also very strongly reprogram water. Yes.
Okay, so their power to reprogram water. So if a poison was
like these DNA sequences, like these DNA sequences with Montagnier.
Yeah. So if they were, for example, designed as a sterility reproductive toxin through water, so it was a odorless, colorless, tasteless toxin that you could put in water to inflict sterility at sublethal doses, then that theoretically, but it was an acute torture poison at lethal doses, that would be something that would be sort of fit the mold of a poison which could have the power to reprogram water, not only by how strong it is, but that it was actually with purpose of inflicting sterility through water.
It could be. I mean, it should be, researched, investigated. But as I told you, following what I know from this new water science, there is a possibility of that, yes.
Yeah. Do you relate your water science to, for example, the HNSO standards, which is the bioaccumulation of toxicity over time for all the OECD countries? Do you sort of, have you started relating it to any of the standards, or are you, I mean, obviously I'm speaking from the poison perspective, but you're more concentrating on the health benefits of
Yes,
reprogramming water, aren't you?
yeah, we are more concentrated on this. But what I know from this research is that many homeopaths would treat, you know, people that were poisoned by homeopathic remedies made from these same poisons,
Yeah.
So, so that they would combat
But
the original poisons.
they are put through a very sophisticated process to be able to do.
Yes, of course, very
Yeah.
sophisticated process. They would give certain order to these poisons, and we can say that, in a sense, this process actually neutralizes the poisons in their molecular effectiveness.
Yeah.
But it builds a sort of mirror, of this poison, something
Right.
like their reflection that challenges and reminds the organism and informs the organisms how to combat the poison,
Right. Yeah, I understand that. Like a yin and yang fitting together. There's the poison,
Yeah,
and then
something
there's
like that. Yes,
the
yes.
reflection of it. Okay,
Yeah,
so it
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
the homeopathy technique takes the poison and it reverses it through a specific treatment
Yeah,
or
yeah.
restructuring. But if you
Mm.
put the poison in just normally into a lake or river like it's been done,
Yeah.
then it is completely disordered and virulent or powerful enough to restructure the water and enhance the
Yeah.
frequency of the rest of the water to the compound that is immersed in it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So tell me more about just to give people that balance then, tell me more about the positive effects, or for example, how you are working on mad cow disease. What is your strategy to affect this technology on being able to remedy that issue?
Well, mad cow disease is it is technically almost impossible to investigate anything concerning the mad cow disease because of this very, very high safety standards. You know,
Ah,
when you do anything and uh, concerning this prion protein, you know, you must how to say burn everything, you know, that was in
ah,
contact with it. Your computers, your clothes, everything must be burnt.
yeah.
Because, as I told you, nobody understands in orthodox science how is it possible that this protein can remain contagious even beyond 600 degrees centigrade. I don't know how many Fahrenheit is this. You should look if you are in Fahrenheit. We are speaking in degrees
But you're
centigrade.
saying
So
incredibly, like, but you get rid of it when you burn it.
yes, yes. I mean, it's 600 degrees centigrade.
So it's sort of
Everything
is it
is
a
becoming
heat
an
resistant
ash, you
poison
know.
protein?
Sorry, you get ash, you know, at 600 degrees centigrade, you know,
Right.
only ash. So no substance, no proteins is left, you know.
Okay. Phew.
Yeah, yeah.
um, okay, so it's funny.
Only.
I just wanted to make a joke, but I was going to say, well, burn everything, because we have a thing that's been promoted here called M. bovis. And you can know that as Mycoplasma bovis or Mycobacterium bovis. Mycobacterium bovis is what they use to synthetically inject TB into animals to test them symptoms.
Mhm.
And if you see
Okay.
an animal with TB symptoms and you see an animal with 1080 poisoning symptoms, they're the same. It's the lymph glands are infected, and so the fluids grow, so they get very, very swollen joints, mastitis infection, all the pneumonia symptoms, which they're promoting that humans will get this summer as Legionnaire's disease as well, which is a result of 1080 poisoning, same thing, just different name. And then the fluids will build to where you've got pus coming out the eyes and ears and nose and everywhere possible. And so you've got those symptoms are what TB is, and then those symptoms are what you get when you inject Mycobacterium bovis into the animal to give TB, and those symptoms are also what you get for Mycoplasma bovis, which they're now promoting as a new contagious disease, which no one else in the world considers it to be a contagious disease. This is a New Zealand invention. And they gave I laughed when you said what you said, because they gave a speech on May 28th this year saying that they were going to eradicate this, which to me means they're going to eradicate all livestock in the country over a period of 10 years. Because they actually sat in the press conference and they said, there's no symptoms for this, because it's basically a bacteria that is mutated due to toxicity. So they're not promoting it like that, but that's what it is. It's a bacteria where it has no cell wall, and the toxicity or the poisons have mutated it. But you can't test for it. So you've got a situation where they sat in the press conference and they said, we're going to eradicate this, but you can't test for it, and there's no symptoms. So all the stock are healthy, but because at any time they could get this bacteria, which is a mutated cell which you can't test for, and there's no symptoms, we're going to force the slaughter of all the stock. So they've literally
Mm.
started slaughtering the invaluable breeding herds of farmers all over the country. And at
Oh, I
ground
see.
zero, there were only 2 herds that had 6 stock, and which could have and were arguably contaminated through feedstock or sabotaged, or it was introduced into their water. But the 2 herds with 6 stock, had all the symptoms of the 1080 type poisoning, which is like TB or whatever. And then all the rest of the herds around the country that were quarantined had no symptoms at all, but they were all forced to slaughter.
Oh, because they think that there is something contagious, and yeah,
No, because they've well, I argue certainly because they've dropped the world's most lethal torture poison right through the waterways, and those
mm,
animals are now consuming bioaccumulating sublethal doses of this poison through their drinking water every day. And they will begin to, over the coming months, break out in the symptoms of,
yeah,
the lymph
yeah,
infections, the mastitis,
mm,
the pneumonia symptoms, and the
mm,
extreme swelling of the joints. It depends on the dosage, but it's the cover narrative, you could say. So
mm,
um, that goes into a little bit more complexity as to what the motive is and why. But I mean, in New Zealand, they're dumping thousands of tons of the world's most lethal torture poisons into all the rivers and streams and lakes right now, right across the bush. And
mm,
in quantities at 6 kg per hectare for monofluoacetate would kill, by direct consumption, it'd kill 122 million people. And at 2 kgs a hectare, it would kill 41 million people. Now that's dispersed across waterways and the bush, mass tortures the animals to death, and then it travels through those rivers and streams at sublethal doses over time to be consumed. So and then the consumption, obviously it metabolizes. So it metabolizes, you can, if you have one dose, it metabolizes out of your body and you might get heart and brain scarring, but this is according to the animal studies. But otherwise it's going to travel, it's going to bioaccumulate and cause, trigger, deadly diseases.
mm, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the sort of situation that we're dealing with. But the disease narratives that they're giving are not acknowledging that those are the symptoms occurring due to the mass poisoning of the water, because they're saying that the poisoning of the water is perfectly safe.
Oh,
So
really?
so that's what I'm arguing against in court, is a massive government propaganda, which is saying that putting the world's most lethal torture poisons in the water is perfectly safe for consumption. And you've even got 10, and it's one of the extremely hazardous classified poisons by the WHO. And it absolutely tortures the animals to death, and then it goes in the water. And they say it, because it metabolizes, it disappears, it's gone. But of course, it metabolizes into the killer molecule, which is the fluorocitrate molecule.
Hmm. I would suggest an investigation, if it is possible, with this water to prove that it is not safe. You should have some organisms under controlled stress. And this may be organisms that are normally used for um, water control, like Daphnia, for instance, or some other. And you should have some specialists in culturing these organisms to know exactly how to control some stress, put on these organisms so that their life is a little strenuous, but not really damaging then. And then you put some this um, uh, hypothetically poisonous water and some pure water, that is 100% pure, and then you can see the difference, because if the organisms are under controlled stress,
Yeah.
the effects are shown almost immediately, and you can prove that there is a difference.
On
Because
the water.
if organisms are normal,
Yeah.
they have certain homeostatic capabilities, so that it would take longer time to demonstrate any symptoms. But with stressed organisms, the symptoms are here at the moment.
Well,
So you can very quickly
no
show.
question that so all the animal studies done, absolutely evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt that the animals are tortured to death or have extreme scarring and diseases and health problems occurring. And then they all fail the bioaccumulation standards of the OECD because they're all slaughtered quite quickly. So they're never allowed to live a normal full life with repeated dosage. So you don't get to see, if you're a young person growing up on drinking this poisoned water at sublethal doses over many, many years, by the time you're a teenager, you're in hospital with ovarian cancer. At 13, you're depressed. And at 21, you're having a stroke. And that's what's happening now. And that's because arguably because they've been drinking this sublethal doses of poisoned water every day over many, many years. But we don't have any animal tests that demonstrate that, because all the animals are killed mostly within 2 weeks, 3 months, 2 years, gone. So you don't get that long-term effect. So we know that it has that effect, but the disconnect is it's obvious, right? If you put poison in water, you'd never then drink that water, not in 1 day, not in 1 week, not in 1 year. If poison is put in water, you'd bury that water deep and get it out of your life. But in New Zealand, they are literally telling people that the poison is put in water and it's completely safe then to consume.
As I
How do
told
you feel
you,
about that?
no, you can prove it by very sensitive tests that it is poisonous, or that it is not healthy. As I told you, by
Great.
experiments involving very sensitive organisms under controlled stress, you
Okay.
can achieve this very, very quickly.
Right. Okay. And can you also measure the frequency of the poison in the
I
water?
think the frequency, I don't know for any really reliable, um, let's say, device that can measure this. But only one thing crosses my mind, and this is that you can measure actually the thickness, the length of easy water. You can do this. So again, you need
Okay.
the laboratory like Jerry Pollack.
Yeah.
And you should know how to really monitor the thickness of the easy layer. And then that, for instance, ordinary water would have some, let's say, zero point 0.3 millimeter long or thick, this easy zone. While with this water, you should get more narrow, bent. So, for
Okay.
instance,
So
only zero point 0.1
you could
or so.
see
Yeah.
it, the effect, the cell dehydrating of the easy water sort of thing. You could see the water.
Yes, and this could be a measure of something, let's say of poisoning, of making disorder of this water. So you can put this water in the system with Nephyon, for instance, and then you can monitor the thickness of this easy water.
Okay. Okay. And I don't know why that sort of got me thinking back about what you were saying earlier when we weren't on video, which is you touched on the sophisticated structure of water, or how sophisticated it could become, which could start to explain, literally back to the origins of life. Like it could start to explain sort of the, I don't know, the complexity of how life is powered, works.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
explain
yeah.
a little bit more about that, just to kind of put it in that reverse context, if you like?
Well, it seems from all that we know from this new water science is, and of course, when it is extended to organisms, that the life of an organism um, is connected and is based and is dependent also on the, let's say, order, dynamic order of water. And if this order is complex um, and also very refined, you know, it can have, this order can have many layers, if you wish, hierarchical. But if it is complex and sufficiently refined, then we are normally living, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that even for the origin of life, there was not enough to have an appropriate biochemistry, as contemporary reductionist science regards, but you must have also a, sufficiently sophisticated water system, water with certain nanoparticles, for instance. And contemporary science is approaching this finding through the discovery and further investigation of the so-called nanobacteria. You know, nanobacteria or nanoparticles uh, are being discovered these days. They are something that are not yet living creatures, but are very sophisticated particles, partially built from anorganic, partially from organic matter. And they can reproduce, for instance. And I would say that they can emerge because the water around them was sufficiently organized, sufficiently sophisticated in its order or dynamic structure.
So the more sophisticated the water, the more sophisticated the life form.
Yes, it seems so. Yes, yes.
So then the sophistication of water in the human body would be much more sophisticated than the water in a mouse.
Mouse is very, very similar to us, for instance. So
okay.
we must be. But I remember something very interesting
Telling me we evolved from
from.
mice.
Sorry, yeah, yeah. I think that we are not so far from genetic standpoint, for instance. But okay, of course, we are in other respects. But I remember now what one very big scientist of new water science told. And this was that the water, I mean, if an organism is ill, it is not an illness of organism, but of water, you know, so that actually, if you are ill, um, water is. This was Emilio del Giudice. It is known in this new water circles very well. He was, I think, constant invited speakers at the water conferences led by Professor Pollack.
Yeah.
And he's late from 2014, I think, now. So he said that we are not ill as pure organisms, but if you are ill, our water actually is ill. You know.
So it's reprogramming
Yes,
the water. Well, I was
yes.
speaking to someone with a technological instrument that reprograms the water through electromagnetic frequency, and they were saying on the animals, for example, the farm animals, when their water was reprogrammed to a sort of a perfect crystal state of liquid, then the farm animals would actually detox. Like they'd have a lot of worms coming out their manure, and they'd sort of be suffering, and then they'd come out with really, really shiny coats and completely renewed as a result of this water, and really healthy, like as a result of the water. Basically, the water detox them or
Yes,
cleanse.
yes, yes. I mean, it's very important what water we drink, you know, what kind of water we drink. This is very important, yeah.
Yeah, it's scary in this country because all the water has been massively poisoned. And they used to, for
Mm,
example, test on the surface, but they would find the residue of the poison too high at too high levels. So then they started testing in the body of the water. But of course, you know, as soon as the 10-80 poison is metabolized, then it's no longer 10-80 poisoning. It's the degradation product of the fluorocitrate molecule. And you've got the Prime Minister on media saying that once it's metabolized, it's gone, the poison's gone, it's safe, it's out of the water, when in fact the science is categorical that it metabolizes into the fluorocitrate molecule, which is the killer. And
mm,
so to get past, you know, because there's almost no science on it, there's definitely no long-term science on the bioaccumulation of a bioengineering project on an entire human population with tons and tons of torture poison. And then you've got all the sort of propaganda which goes against all common sense, but because it's said by people trusted, then it's taken for granted, you know, it's taken as stated. And then the media are supporting it too. So you've got a situation where the entire country is having our waterways bombed with the world's most lethal chemicals, and we can't seem to stop it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
What's when I tell you that, what's your response as a water scientist with your knowledge on water? What's your response?
Response to this problem.
Yeah.
I would say that as a scientist, I would say that this water should be examined very carefully, sensitively, as I told you, on sensitive organisms and under stress. And if it is then found that these organisms react to the water in a different way, so that, for instance, they are devitalized or they cannot reproduce themselves as quickly as organisms still under same stress, but with pure water, then they should stop this. You know, it would mean that. Sorry, it is my. Okay, so that they should stop this practice and just before this is the problem is not resolved.
Yeah.
So I think this all could be done with experiments, also experiments on tissue cultures, if you wish, on sensitive water organisms. I mean, certain organisms are really very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
And then not on humans, but just on certain crabs, you know, water, little, very little, Daphnia are called.
Well, the government are testing it on humans, so I think it's fine to test it on humans. You've got a real
Well,
life human experiment going on in New Zealand that you could study.
okay, but they, you know, human organisms are how to say resilient, you know, and sometimes it is a long time before the effects are demonstrated in a convincing way, you know. But with certain aquatic organisms, you can have the data very, very quick. quickly,
Right.
and you can say, look, these are the results, and the
Okay,
results
so
are bad.
then
Yeah.
what you're saying, like for example, you would the most sensible thing, obviously, to argue to the judge is that this program is stopped, and that let's get the leading water scientist
To
to the
transit.
poison in water,
Yeah.
so that we know.
Yes. 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 Until all this is resolved with certainty, so that it is certainly validated or proved that the water, which the government would say is completely healthy, that it is really healthy, because if it is not, it would show itself in tests with sensitive organisms very quickly.
Okay, that's great to know that there are specific tests that you would do, because I was just reading a report that was published at the end of last year stating that 1 in 5 people in New Zealand do not have access to safe drinking water, and one of the reasons they gave for that is because of chemicals in the water. And
Mm-hmm.
so they acknowledge, like, the world statistic, the World Health Organization says 1 in 9 people don't have safe drinking water. In New Zealand,
Mm-hmm.
our own government admit it's 1 in 5. They also admit in
Oh,
that report that one of the reasons is because of chemicals, and yet they're dumping the world's most lethal chemicals by, thousands and thousands of tons into our water supply. But they're saying
mm-hmm.
that by the time, because it dilutes, then there's no
Oh yes, yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
effect.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, if you take Montanet's work, because it
Yeah,
dilutes, it becomes a more enhanced version of the water with the information of the poison in it. So it becomes a more enhanced version of the compound itself.
yeah. It can still. Montagnier actually did not use some very concentrated, you know, solution of this DNA in water,
Yeah.
of this DNA fragments, but I think that he used some only a millions, so 1 against a million dilution.
Yeah.
It is so-called 10 to minus 6 dilution.
A
So,
million
so
dilution, and
really,
then it
it
was a
can be
more
more
enhanced
stronger.
version.
Mm,
So at
yeah,
a,
yeah,
it became more, the more diluted, the stronger it became.
it can be that way. Yes.
Yeah. Which is so important to clarify, because if you didn't have a scientific test to prove that, then the government propaganda is that the more diluted it becomes, then it's harmless. It's so diluted that you'd have to drink such an incredible high dosage to get back to the original lethal quantity, that it's impossible to cause harm, which is Neanderthal assumption, really, because it has no
Mm,
basis in science. It's just a simpleton sort of guess, just by
mm,
you know
yes, yes, yes. But this is because this blockage of in the scientific mind, because this reductionism that everything is in molecules, and if you have a diluted solution, then it is safe. It is just, our safety standards do not listen to this new water science, uh, which,
I see.
is discovering new horizons, new truth, if you wish.
Yeah, they
Um,
don't. Well, it's funny because even Einstein, was it Einstein who said everything is frequency, light, and vibration, or something like that? So
yeah.
we've known it for a long time, but you're right. So because they can't test for the fluorocitrate molecule, and because they can't, because the frequency restructured water, the structured water or the frequency of water can't be
Yes,
tested.
you must know that what we are speaking now, the structure of water and similar things, are just nonsense for mainstream science, for mainstream physics. Says that it is just so-called quasi-science or pseudoscience.
But it's not, because the papers are written and the tests are conducted, and it's
Yeah.
a it's a well established fact
Yes.
now that this is the new frontier of understanding the sophistication of
Yes.
water to
Yes.
understand life itself.
I agree with you, but we are in the minority. the vast majority of scientists think, as I told you, that this is all some mystical outlook on water, you know.
But I think that's where Montaigne's work changed a lot, because you could see that the frequency was transmitted electronically and then recreated far away. You could
Yes, I
see
know. I
absolute
know
evidence.
also other experiments. There are a lot of experiments. There is even a study, you know, published on. It is bibliometrical study about physicochemical investigations of ultra high dilutions,
Yeah,
and they found many absolutely valuable scientific articles confirming the this structuring of water, information of water, you know, and so on, from again physical-chemical standpoint, not even involving organisms, you know.
yeah.
But still, this is a minority, you know. Contemporary
Well,
science
it's
is
it's the frontier, and
yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to take others a while to catch up, especially if,
yeah,
as you
yeah.
say, they think in
This
molecules,
is a
which is a good way to say it.
frontier, yeah, yeah.
But it is the new frontier of understanding everything, because we all know from common sense that water is life. Without water, we die.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the second
yeah.
most abundant molecule in the world, and its
Yeah.
function, even I find the old work of Gerald Pollack's very interesting, that he stumbled across water because he was looking for the reason why the muscle could contract, and it was because, in fact, of the structured water that enabled the intelligence, if you like, for the muscle to contract. So, and I don't see, with water in crystal form as a sort of and a computer storage, or a crystal stores information, right? So it is. How do you compare that to artificial intelligence?
Water science to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, in
Um,
terms of the ability of water to retain memory and restructure and reflect the frequency of even the person that it's confronted with, and the thoughts that it's confronted with, or the music that it's confronted with, or I can imagine the color that it's confronted with. So it
yeah,
is.
I would say that water is highly impressionable in a
Yeah,
way, which means actually, if you think this through, that water doesn't have a very good memory in certain cases. Mm, because new impressions, you know, can cover the old ones,
yeah.
and this is also the possibility how to heal water, you know, through new impressions, through actually reprogramming it. Yeah. I would say that artificial intelligence is something that is work of us humans via machines. And I would say that water could have a sort of some natural intelligence, if you wish, a natural way of adaptability to circumstances. Um, but again, we even don't have a theory of intelligence that would cover the whole biological world, not to mention the dimensions of the so-called non-living world that water is still regarded, you know, to
Well, yeah,
belong.
because, water transfers through us, so it imprints with our frequency. So if you tested each molecule, it would reflect
Yeah,
the frequency that we are, and have its own
yeah.
crystal formation. And then that processes through us, and in a way, it's sort of our energetic. Well, it energizes our body. It's like the battery of our body in a way. So. Um, and it has a sort of a sophisticated imprint to reflect our energy and the nature of it, whether it be beautiful or sophisticated or simple or ugly. And then it flows through us, and I just kind of feel like it's got some sort of life force management like purpose, like it sort of, it reflects our energy or balances our energy or processes our energy. It's got some sort of function to balance our function. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes, of course. I mean, as I told you, what Wilhelm Reich did with sun, and that he energized water via copper plates and wires, and so it is possible to restructure, to energize water, even, for instance, by emission of the bioenergy or biofield from bioenergy healers or
yeah.
healing touch, And so, yes, we can balance our health by drinking healthy water. And this healthy water can be also from natural springs sometimes, or this can be achieved in more artificial ways.
And
Yeah.
do you have any of, like, do you work on technologies that can artificially change the frequency of water?
Yes. We have such devices, I told you at the beginning. We built actually many such devices, and we have two of them now, by which we can restructure water according to certain original substances, so that water can have then an impact or an influence that would emulate the original substance, but without any harmful side effects.
Okay, and are you commercially deploying that, or you are still developing tests for that?
We are partially developing this, and we are beginning with some commercial, let's say, enterprises, but it is a difficult thing because pharmaceutical industry, has lobbied the very, very strict laws, that inhibit,
Ah,
the selling of anything that is not the remedy that not went through a sort of some validation, which is very costly. So if you don't have enough money, you cannot afford this in a normal way. But we are gradually finding some ways, because we really can help people through this,
yeah,
even animals.
exactly. I think that is the biggest problem is the pharmaceutical companies or the pharmaceutical industry block the competition.
Yeah,
And of course, if
yeah,
you could heal through frequency
mm,
and understood frequency in terms of health,
yeah,
then you wouldn't
yeah,
need pills anymore, would you?
yeah. Um, so, yeah.
So that's the challenge. Money and law
Okay.
changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to speak tonight.
Yeah. Thank you
Oh,
too.
it's your
So
morning.
please, um, just inform me how it went then, your
Well, I mean,
case.
in an optimized state, a judge's order would be made to stop it, and I'd be calling all the water scientists in the world to, categorically evidence that this is absolutely lethal. But it's sure. Our rivers, lakes, and streams are so toxic now. Most of them you can't swim in, you can't enter, um,
Oh.
and you
Mm,
certainly can't drink from. And so we've got a complete collapse of our ecosystem occurring, and we have an absolute health crisis going on. And many of the new diseases that are promoted, or the diseases that are most prevalent, are exactly the symptoms of what these poisons inflict. So
mm,
peculiar situation we've got happening here, but it's irrational, and no one in their right mind would put poison into water, which is the substance of all life. So let's see.
oh, yeah.
it's a reasonable
Okay.
argument to make to request that it's stopped. So, we'll keep fighting. But the International Criminal Court are also reviewing this case. So it's very serious, but it's
Yeah,
also quite
I see.
exciting, still seeing with the right technologies, like, for example, the things that you're working on, how quickly it could be remedied through frequency.
It's difficult to say, because if you have all these technological means, but you should have, I would say, some very good mechanical filters, then microorganisms, appropriate microorganisms, and then also some, let's say, energy renewal process, technological. Um, it is difficult to say because I don't know how much into this water, underground water, it went, how strongly it is ingrained in, in soil and so on. So I would say many years.
Many years. 7, 14, 30, 80.
Well, I think that less than this, but again, it depends on how many of such technological means would you use, how
Yeah.
many of them, and how strong they would be, and so on. So with really a strong campaign, you can achieve this in just, I would say, 5 years or so.
Right.
But it should be a strong thing.
It would have to be an absolute, complete remediation program that just very intensely focused on remedying
Yes,
all of
of
it and
course.
stopping all poison.
With full governmental will, behind.
Well,
Government should
we'll
support
need a
this.
we'll need the
Yeah.
ICC to put the government in jail first, and then we might have a
Uh-huh.
chance.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
look, it's been lovely to speak with you, and
Yeah.
I look forward to. Will your talk be on the water conference? Will it be put online for me to look at?
Yes, it
Okay,
will be. Yes, it will be online, I think. Yes.
okay.
So on Thursday. Yeah.
I look forward to
Okay.
hearing the speech. Good luck. Hope
Yeah.
it goes well.
Thank you. Good luck too. Yeah.
Okay,
Goodbye.
talk soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.